All right, so welcome everyone to tonight's event with Go Overseas, Gap Year 101 with Jason Sarouhan. My name is Drew Beasley, and I am the Go Overseas Outreach and Events Coordinator for USA Gap Year Fairs and Go Overseas. As you can see from many of these pictures, I've taken just about every opportunity that I've been able to get to travel abroad and have intentional experiences volunteering and learning abroad. I've led hikes through national parks, I've volunteered my way across South America, and I've taught English in Prague. But what's most important to me is my gap year experience, which was the real impetus for all of these experiences and more that I've managed to have abroad. That's why I'm so excited that you're all spending your Monday night with us, learning from Jason, our expert gap year advisor, to learn a little bit about what's out there for your gap year, where you can go, what you can do, and why you should do it all. So moving forward, I wanted to just take a quick note and let you know that this event is brought to you by Go Overseas, which you can think of as Yelp, but for experiential travel programs. On Go Overseas, you can learn about gap year programs and get started with your gap year search tonight. You can read verified alumni reviews, find programs, browse articles and guides, and learn about scholarship opportunities, which I'm going to encourage you all to keep an eye out for. Our $5,000 gap year scholarship is available right now and runs till March 15th. I will throw all of these links in the chat below. That's definitely one you're going to want to keep an eye out for. Next up, in terms of resources for your gap year search, is our Gap Matcher. And this is one that I'm super excited about. Our Gap Matcher is a customized quiz that you can take at any time to find your dream program. All you have to do is navigate to the Gap Matcher, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you want to go, what you want to do on your gap time, and this program will generate a list of different gap year exhibitors and opportunities for you to consider. I'd also encourage you to take a look at our digital guide. This digital guide is our virtual catalog into over a dozen gap year programs with opportunities all around the world. You can take a look via program type in terms of what you want to do with your gap year time to figure out which program is right for you. I'd also like to point out that this gap year info session tonight is one of many gap year virtual events that we'll be hosting over the next couple of years. After tonight, we'll have gap year events every night for the rest of this week and next week, focusing on different gap year programs. You can tune in at any point to any of these programs to learn a little bit about what suits you on your gap year. If you want to learn about culture and language, volunteering, adventure, arts and media, we've got the program for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Sarouhan. Jason is an accredited gap year consultant and has more than a decade of experience advising young adults in their gap year decision. An experienced gapper himself, Jason has also more recently taken a trip around the US during the COVID times in his Sprinter van to highlight the American gap year. With that, I'll pass it over to Jason.
Thank you so much, Drew, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. Drew, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide. As Drew mentioned, my name is Jason Sarouhan, and my wife Jane and I work as accredited gap year consultants or coaches or counselors. They're all the same term to describe an individual who really supports mostly young adults, although we work with lots of adults of all ages, in taking compelling gap time to get out into the world. And tonight I have the real privilege to work with Go Overseas and the USA Gap Year Fairs to lead you on about a 25-minute journey of a Gap Year 101. We're going to highlight all the nuts and bolts that you need to know about what a gap year is and ultimately how to plan that time. Drew mentioned that I've worked as a consultant now for the last 10 plus years, but my journey as a gapper started when I was in college and took time away from school to go study conservation and wildlife biology, which was my passion and my major at the time. It led me into a career leading these types of trips. Like Drew, I've led many wilderness-based experiences, as well as cultural immersion gap experiences abroad. And then I worked as the director of a gap year program as well, which is where I met my wife, Jane, and the two of us fell in love with the work that we were doing, supporting students in that way, and ultimately founded J2 Guides. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation tonight and sharing this with you, and also particularly the Q&A that's going to come later. Next slide, please, Drew. When we start thinking about the gap year, it's always helpful that we begin on the same page. And we'd like to just start with a fundamental definition tonight. There's a lot of information about gap year online. Maybe you're talking with friends about it. Maybe you've spoken with your academic counselor at school about it, or you're talking with people in your community. And we just want to help simplify things a bit, because the reality is for us at J2 Guides, now having worked with thousands of students to plan their gap time, gap year or gap time really is just any intentional period of time that an individual takes to step out of what is typical and comfortable for them and to get out into the world to learn and to grow, and mostly doing that through hands-on real-world experiences. So note that in that simple definition, I didn't state how long you had to go for, where you had to go, when you had to go in your life. All of those are really unique aspects that you're going to determine, because the reality is some gap year students will be high school graduates and they will take time right after they graduate school, but others will be college students like I was, or folks who have graduated school, or people who are right in the middle of their careers. You can take gap time when it's right for you, and ultimately you can take the right amount of time for you as well. Some students that we're working with this year just have the summer available to them between high school graduation and whatever's coming next, whether that's college or community college or going right into the workforce or into a trade school or the military. But they've got that 3 months of summer and they want to do something really amazing with it. That's enough time for you to have some compelling gap year experiences. Other students, like a student that my wife Jane spoke with today, have gotten into the college of their dreams, and they know that already, except they've been offered a January admission to go to that school. So now they have 6 months of time after they graduate high school in order to do something really amazing and profound. That is a lot of time. You could probably get involved in 2, maybe even 3 different experiences in 6 months. And then the quote unquote typical gap year student might take anywhere between 9 and 12 months of gap time. And of course, some people take more open-ended time than that. So again, the message tonight, the take-home message is, if you're choosing to take gap time, it's going to be the right amount of time for you and ultimately the right set of experiences. And some of what goes into choosing the right set of experiences is where you're going to go. Drew has traveled far and wide. I've been very fortunate in my career to travel far and wide. And if you want to go to the ends of the earth and go to a different culture or a different language setting, if you want to be immersed in a way of living that's really different than the way that you're living now, amazing. That's fantastic. There are so many gap year experiences out there that will help you fulfill that goal and dream. But if you're pleased with or inspired by staying in the United States, if you're interested in staying in your home state, frankly, if you're interested in staying in your hometown, you can still have a very growth-filled experience for yourself by, again, just stepping out of that comfort zone and figuring out what that means to you. As Drew mentioned, our family of 3, my wife, our child, Kaya, and I, had a chance to travel all around the United States in a Sprinter van in the first year of the pandemic, 2020, 2021. And I have to tell you, I saw parts of our country that I had never dreamed of seeing, and I can't wait to go back to many of those. Having grown up in California and now living in Massachusetts, I really have seen a lot of the coast, but so much of the middle of our country I haven't. And so that was very eye-opening. And maybe you're going to find some eye-opening destinations in the US for yourself. We're going to talk a lot about the gap year here in these next few minutes. And one of the ways that I'd like to do that is to frame it through the idea of you actually planning your gap time. So next slide, please, Drew. There are 3 main steps in planning your gap year. And the first one of those is identifying kind of the what and the why and ultimately the where of where you want to go. But the next step is really critical, which is defining your parameters, those things that you need. And then ultimately, we're going to wrap it up tonight with the discussion about how you lay out all these pieces in the order that's right for you. Because of course, there has to be some kind of a progression, and we don't just throw things at a dartboard willy-nilly. We want to actually be really mindful about it. We want to be intentional about it. There's that word again. So why don't we start with that first step of planning, which is kind of the why and the what and the where. Next slide, please. So when Jane and I begin planning work with students, the first question we actually ask students isn't what or where. what do you want to do or where do you want to go? It's actually, why are you doing this? Why are you taking gap time? And it's the easiest question to jump over because we could just get excited about an image we saw online or about a program that someone showed us. And all of a sudden, now we're just off and running with this idea of a gap year. But it's really important to start with the why. And frankly, if I were a college counselor and advising you about what college you might want to go to, I wouldn't start with what college is. I would start with, well, why do you want to go to college? And for so many students, we don't even ask them that question, right? It's an important one. Understanding your motivation, understanding your intentions is critical. So up here on the screen, you'll see several of the most commonly cited reasons why students tell us that they want to take gap time. And have your eyes take a look at these because some of them might relate for you. The number one reason, of course, that we hear is that students are feeling a bit burnt out of school. And if you're a junior or a senior on this call or a parent of a junior or a senior, you might be able to resonate with that. School's been really hard, particularly in the last 3 years for so many students. So that alone with the COVID pandemic is one thing. But then there's just the relative nature of rigor now that's in high school. It's much different than when I went to school and probably much different than when most of the parents or guardians on this call went to school. We're priming you to go to college starting in middle school in many cases. And so that leads to students who are hyper-focused on academics and performance, really trying to put their best kind of showcase forward for these schools. And the reality of that is that creates a lot of energy output without a lot of energy back in. And so if you're feeling a bit burnt out, we want to encourage you to think about refilling that well before going on to college, if that's your path. College is the main event. College is where you want to get to. And that's what gap year is all about. It's about bridging where you are right now to the place that you want to be. And not just getting you there, but it's getting you there energized, getting you there excited, getting you there so passionate about wanting to be in that spot, again, college, a career, trade school, that you can't wait to go through those doors and get started. So burnout is one thing we hear a lot about, but the flip side of that coin is also curiosity about oneself or being out in the world, right? Part of the burnout is that we probably didn't have time or as much time as we wanted to focus on us, focus on our interests, focus on being exposed to more ideas out in the world. And that is what gap time is all about. Again, it's this notion of stepping out of what is comfortable for us, getting into what is often referred to as our stretch zone, that space where we're dancing on the edge of success, where we're likely going to be successful, but it requires a lot of focus and a lot of curiosity. And sometimes we make mistakes when we're in our stretch zone. But the idea of gap year is that you're challenging yourself at just the right amount so that those mistakes become really great learning opportunities and, of course, not catastrophe. So this is the fun balance, and figuring out your why or whys is going to really mean a lot for you. Additionally, I just wanted to share, gap year students utilize this time for a wide variety of reasons. Some people are working on their wellness or mental health. And after these last 3 years, many of us are working on our mental health, including myself, right? I feel my own anxiety really peaked now. I just traveled out to California to visit my family, and I cannot believe how much chatter is happening in my brain when I'm out of the comfort and the confines of the life that I live normally. It's amazing what I'm experiencing. I can't imagine what all these young adults are experiencing in this incredible time of independence and growth. Also, we hear about a lot of students who are wanting to take the time to experience what a potential career path might look like, or what you might academically want to study in advance of going on to that next level of education for yourself. And that's really smart. One of the things that I learned about my own interests and professions and professional pursuits during my gap time is, although I was very passionate, am very passionate about conservation, and although I love animals and wildlife, and I couldn't have dreamed for a more amazing experience than living in a tent in the Serengeti, listening to lion calls at night, or tracking elephants on foot with a ranger out in the middle of Ngorongoro Crater, all things that I had a chance to do. While as romantic and amazing as those sound, when I got there and I was doing it, I realized that's not how I wanted to spend my life. I love people. I'm interested in interacting with people. And that became quite apparent when I was there out in the middle of nowhere with very few people around. taking gap time is going to give you that firsthand experience. And even if it doesn't affirm what you thought you might want it to do, it's likely going to confirm for you some of the things that you might know deep down. And that's going to help direct you in the direction you want to go on the compass heading that you're looking to actually track down. So that's what happened to me. And that's what happens for so many students who use gap time to really look at their options and what might be ahead. So again, we're going to start with the why, and hopefully by now you've already figured out, I've got a few whys. The other important thing about starting with the whys and figuring that out is because for most seniors, this time of year, late February and early March, is the time of year that you're going to field one question, and basically one question only, from every adult in your life, which is, hey, Jason, you're about to graduate, so what comes next? And the reality is, it's great to have an answer to that question. And an easy answer is, oh, well, I'm going to college, or, oh, I've decided I'm going to get a job in my own apartment. But if you're taking a gap year, it's really good, particularly because most people don't even know what this is, to be able to share the motivations for doing it. Oh, Uncle Jim, I'm interested in taking a gap year. I'm actually going to go pursue my love of wildlife and conservation. And I found this amazing program in Tanzania where I'm going to get hands-on field-based research. And I want to do this so that I can decide if this is the direction I want to go in college before I start spending several years and lots of money pursuing that. I don't know that there's an adult out there who would look at that and say, wow, that doesn't sound like a great idea. It sounds like a great idea. All of us in the adult world know figuring out what you want to do before you invest time and money is a really positive thing. So figuring out your whys in advance of taking gap time is a really crucial step. Next slide, please, Drew. Now, once we've figured out the whys, this is where we get to do a lot of the fun stuff. And so for any Ted Lasso fans out there who have the belief in their hearts, I want to offer you a free ticket, a pass to dream big. One of my heroes, I do a lot of trail running. One of my heroes is a woman named Zoe Ram. And Zoe issued us, a group of trail runners, a free pass to dream big and chase big dreams. And so that's what I want to offer you all right now, because in this next phase of your planning, next slide, please, it's a chance for you to begin to do a brainstorm. A brainstorm is just like it sounds. It's an opportunity for you to allow all of the ideas to come out. So what we encourage our students to do is grab a pen and paper and go sit somewhere beautiful. Don't do it on a screen. Don't do it with your parents hovering over your shoulders. Parents, give your kids a chance to actually do this, but go somewhere beautiful and start writing down ideas. And here's some simple prompts. If you could go anywhere in the world, where are the places that you're most interested in going? If you could learn any skill, what kinds of skills would you want to learn while you're on your gap year? If you could be around any kinds of people, who are the people you want to be around and be exposed to? And ultimately, how would you want to grow over the course of this year? These are impractical questions, right? Because the reality is you might put down on there, I want to climb Mount Everest, and I want to learn how to Class 5 whitewater kayak, or I'm interested in working for Apple and doing a high-end internship. These might not be practical realities as they're written, but we're going to get to practicalities later. What's critical is that the seed of this, I want to climb a big mountain. I'm really interested in developing my skills in the outdoors. I'm really excited to work for a big tech company. This is the critical aspect of the brainstorming process. These are the seeds you will plant. And if we don't allow them to get planted, of course, they can't grow. And the reality is, though there will be practicalities on budget, on where your family is comfortable with you traveling, on the reality of your skill set and what you might actually be able to do, you're capable of, and there is more opportunity than you might guess out there at a more reasonable and affordable and economic price than you might be imagining right now. So let the dreams get down on paper, because if you post this somewhere, like in your bathroom mirror or on the door jamb to your bedroom door, you're going to look at this over and over and over again. And the reality is, your eyes might go to several of these ideas often. Those are the ones you want to put in bold or highlight over or put an asterisk next to, because likely those are going to become the pillars or the foundation of your gap time. So imagine in this person's brainstorm list that Spanish was one of those ideas that they kept coming to over and over and over again. And travel was one of the ideas, and an internship. Okay, Now we've focused the lens a little bit more. We've gone from our why to the what, and they're the big macro what's. But now we can at least start looking at Spanish-oriented programs and internships and figuring out how to go about that, and travel and thinking about what am I really up for with travel, because that is going to take us to the next level, which is now step 2 in your planning. Next slide, please. We have to start figuring out our parameters for gap time. And as I was saying earlier, each person is really unique in the way that they approach this. Your gap time might look really different than your best friend, even though you two might think you're exactly alike. The reality is we're all really unique, wonderful humans. And so no matter who you are, no matter what your goals and inspirations are, there are 4 key ingredients that we encourage students to think about when they're setting the parameters. Again, this is the step 2 now of planning out your gap year. So the first thing is we got to start with that level of intention. Whatever you are doing, it is not happening by accident, right? It might be happening spontaneously, but it is no accident that ultimately you're pursuing that amazing internship in IT. Choose it. And if you're choosing something, commit to it. Commit to the path until the path runs out. But really do this with intention. If you don't have goals when you take gap time, the reality is you're probably not going to do much. But if you set several goals really intentionally, the likelihood is that you're going to be able to achieve some, if not all of them. The second piece to this is building in structure. Each one of us is capable of and competent enough with lots of different skills. But the reality is it's really helpful if each day we wake up during our gap time with something meaningful to do. Something meaningful could mean waking up and going and working and making money. And that could be actually a really compelling way to spend some of your gap time. I highly recommend it. I know Drew does. My wife Jane does. Working is great during your gap time, but build in some kind of structure that ultimately will allow you to wake up and go, I'm going to do this thing. It's a worthwhile thing. I'm learning and I'm growing while doing it. It could be volunteering. It could be that internship. It could be part of a group, being part of a group program. It could even be independent travel if you've thought, again, intentionally about what that travel is supposed to mean for you. Thirdly, we really want to build in a layer of mentorship. Mentorship is what sets the idea of gap year apart from pretty much everything else that you might be doing. If you were to pursue some of the amazing facilitated gap year programs that are out there, one of the key aspects that makes them so unique is the fact that they have these incredible leaders or instructors or guides. These individuals are here as adults to really share with you this amazing new environment, teach you the skills of how to be successful there, and then let you be successful practicing those skills in that environment. That mentorship is the crucial aspect of gap time. So build that in, align yourself with adults that you're inspired by. And of course, the final step is align yourself with peers that you're inspired by as well. Lots of students like to be alone. They like their alone time. They might be interested in traveling alone, and all of that is wonderful. And gap time is about stepping into a space of the unknown, sometimes of discomfort, sometimes adversity. And the reality of that is that it is much easier to face that discomfort or that adversity or that unknown when you're around other people who are in the same chapter of life that you are. So think about it. Maybe your passion or interest is working with sea turtles and you want to go do that down in Costa Rica. Well, there are lots of volunteer programs that will take anybody who is 18 and up, which means you as an 18-year-old could be volunteering with me as a mid-40-year-old, and maybe with your parents who are probably around that age, but also your grandparents might be able to be there too, because there's no upper age cap. Does that sound exciting to you? I'm curious. Are you interested in being with adults that are your parents' age? Most young adults say to me, actually, I'd rather be with people my own age. Are there programs where I could be with someone 18 to 25? Figuring this out and figuring out how to be around your peers is really important. And that's an important step when you're actually looking at and evaluating the options in front of you. So again, no matter what you choose and no matter what variety of activities, build in that intention, that structure, that mentorship, and those peers, and you are going to have a wonderful and successful gap year. Next slide, please. Building off of that, we start focusing the lens in to the next level. And now we have to really make some concrete decisions about the things that we include or the aspects of our gap time that are going to keep us happy, healthy, and ultimately thriving. And there's a lot of them up here. And rather than go through all of them one by one, I just want to share there's a lot of decisions to be made around the kinds of activities that you might look at for your gap time. Is there going to be a cost to them, or are these ultimately low or no cost? Maybe they actually pay you to be a part of that experience. Or is this particular opportunity for Spanish one that you want to have internationally? Or are you happy being down on the border close to Texas and having a domestic experience, but being able to utilize your Spanish? Is it something that you want to be a part of for 1 week, like a cooking class? Or is one of your major goals cooking and you want to do that for 3 months? Figuring out how important and how much time to designate to each one of those goals is also another parameter or nuance that you'll want to figure out. It's a filter, if you will. Additionally, figuring out, are you building soft skills like public speaking, the ability to work in groups or teams, or are these more hard skills like learning how to do video game design or learning how to scuba dive? There's lots of different nuances and ways to build out skills, and the things that you want to develop for yourself are going to be inherently involved in some of those experiences and may not be present in others. It's good to figure that out in advance. Additionally, perhaps you're someone who's really comfortable in urban settings. Do you want to push the boundaries and go somewhere where there's not running water or flush toilets? Or conversely, maybe you grew up on a farm and you'd really like to see what life is like in the city. These are finite options. It's an experiment. You could probably do anything for 3 months, right? Take this opportunity to actually step out of what is comfortable and maybe try something new on. You might be surprised at how well you adapt and ultimately how those skills will translate back to the environments that you're really comfortable in. And then finally, what activities do you want to be group-based and which ones do you want to have be solo? Are you interested in driving a van across country? Does that sound like it'd be fun to do alone? Or would you like to do that with 2 of your best friends? Are you excited about the idea of traveling to Thailand? And is that something that you have the skills to do now by yourself, or would you benefit from being part of a group program? All of these kinds of considerations are what get built in once you start focusing those lenses of the what and ultimately dial into the how. And that's what the parameters are, is how you're going to go about doing this. Next slide. The last and final piece in gap year planning is the idea of this progression. Imagine it as a gap year being a puzzle, and you want to actually put the pieces in the right order so that it fits well together. And one of the attitudes that you can ultimately take around the idea of a gap year progression is one of going from a space of more support in the beginning of your gap time and moving in a trajectory of more independence by the end of your gap time. This is a philosophy that is really commonly advised in this field, and it's something that makes a lot of common sense. Whenever we're learning a new skill, whether it's swimming or skiing or reading, we try and take the new learner into the shallow end. We introduce them into this new environment in a way that's going to feel comfortable and safe. We put lots of safeguards around them. We give them tons of instruction. And ultimately, once they've had a chance to practice their skills, we let them off into the deeper waters, if you will. And so we want you to think about your gap time in the same way. Don't start with the hardest thing first. Don't launch yourself into the deep end if you don't have practice there. Build up to it, because the reality is, if you were to set your gap year up like this, kind of in seasons, if you will, you could actually build skills in the summer that will ultimately be readily applicable in the fall. And you can be simultaneously building more skills in the fall that will be ready and applicable for the winter. And if you keep building in this way, you'll constantly be on the cusp of that stretch learning zone, which will feel great because you'll constantly be successful, but it also allows you to immediately apply all of those things. And by the end, you'll have gone from this experience of being like, oh, I'm kind of reliant upon lots of other adults or other people in my gap time, to a place of, wow, I am really independent right now. I feel very comfortable navigating this city on my own. I can navigate all of these forms of transportation by myself. I've got my own job and my own apartment, and I now can cook 5 meals for myself. I couldn't do that at the start of my gap year. So again, you're looking for this idea of a progression towards independence, starting from support and moving to that place of feeling really personally empowered. While there are many, many structured gap year programs out there that range from 6 weeks to 3 months to, in some cases, 6 to 9 months, there are also thousands of volunteer experiences, hundreds of or internship-based organizations that could coordinate those for you with thousands of companies in the world. There are tens of thousands of work exchange opportunities where in exchange for 20 hours a week of your labor, they give you food and housing so that you can explore an area you want. And of course, there are amazing skills courses in anything that you want to learn out there in the world. So you might build together, again, 3 or 4 or 5 different experiences over the progression of your gap time. So the final note that I want to leave you with is a question, which is, why should you take a gap year? Next slide, please, Drew. And my final answer to you is because you actually can. And for all of the people who are, potential gappers out there, young adults who are, in the beginning of their 20s or in their late teens, this is a really special time of your life. It's a time of our lives where most of us don't have a tremendous amount of the adult responsibilities that most of us tend to take on later in our lives. It's a chance for you to explore. It is a chance for you to be able to experiment in really meaningful and positive ways. This is a chapter where once you've graduated high school, the door to college is open. And the reality is there is no set timeline of when you have to go. One of the things that lots of folks aren't really aware of in this country is the attitude that colleges have towards gap year students, which is one of a double thumbs up. And the reason colleges like gap year students is because they've started researching gap year students. And there's been a number of research papers done to study the data about how gap year students perform once they go to college. And what colleges are finding is over and over and over again, when they look at gap year students, they are outperforming GPA-wise their non-gap counterparts every single year of college. And not only that, they're outperforming them every single semester. So their GPAs tend to be higher than students who go right on from high school into college. It's not really a mystery why. If you're interested in what you're studying and if you're focused on why you're actually in college and not there because it's socially really fun and you're experimenting with freedom for the first time, you're likely actually going to do better in your college classes. There's no mystery there. It's just what tends to happen. When we're excited about it, we tend to do well in it. Not only that, but gap year students tend to graduate in 4 years much more commonly than the typical college-age student today. The average graduation rate in the United States of most 4-year schools is actually closer to 6.5 years for the typical student in the US. And so if you could cut that timeline short, if you could actually go through college in 4 years, think about the cost savings, think about the time savings of what that means for you. Additionally, gap year students tend to transfer a lot less often, which is also a big time suck and a money suck because often you have to redo credits that were not transferred over successfully. Also, it's just really challenging because you have to find out that next new school for you. So colleges tend to be big fans of this idea of gap time, and almost every college in this country will grant you 1 year's worth of deferment, meaning if you are accepted for the fall of 2023, most schools in the country will offer you the chance to come in the fall of 2024. This is a rare gift, right? This is an amazing thing. I can tell you once I hit my 30s, it would have been almost impossible for me to take this time. I was too ensconced and established in my career. I had gotten married. We had bought a house. We started having kids. And all of a sudden, my timeline and trajectory, as most adults do have the same timeline, tends to feel like, oh my gosh, there are 20 years now that are completely spoken for, and they do not include me going out to take this time. So why take gap time? Because you actually can, and college is going to be there and waiting for you when you get there. So if college is your dream, great. The working world is also going to be there. Gap time is an amazing opportunity. And it's a time right now where if your parents or your guardians are intrigued by this for you and they're willing to help fund it, it's likely one of the only times they're going to do that. So if this is something that excites you, and I hope it does, I hope you'll give it some really serious consideration. Go Overseas is considered one of the major resources out there for gap year and travel-based experiences. All you have to do is go on their website and see there's thousands of options out there of organizations that you could participate with and internships and study abroad. It's a great place for you to start when looking at this. And of course, you have lots of other resources available to you as well. Next slide, please, Drew. So as we mentioned earlier, I'm Jason Sarouhan. I would love to be able to answer any questions that you all have. I'll drop my information here in the chat, but I know Drew's probably been fielding lots of questions, and I'm happy to answer them whenever you all are ready. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thanks so much, Jason, for all of that information. You're really making me want to take another gap year again.
Do it, Drew.
With that being said, we've got about 10 minutes left in the evening. This is a perfect opportunity for you all to use the Q&A feature right over on the right hand of your screen to ask Jason any questions. As I'm sure your heads are all spinning with other opportunities, ideas, whatever you may have after that, please, the time is yours. But I do see one question that I just want to address real quickly. I saw this in two places. Tonight's session, the webinar, will be shared live with you via email. After this event, you'll have this copy of the recording to take a look at as many times as you want. As a couple other questions may be popping in, Jason, I did want to kick it off with one question that I know I had as a gap year student and that I hear all of the time. You had mentioned a little bit about college and the transition and how colleges give 2 thumbs up to gap year students. But what will it be like for me if I am entering college after a gap year? What can I expect if all my friends are a year ahead? If I'm entering as a freshman with students who are a year younger, what will that be like for me?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I would love to hear your answer to it, Drew, because that's a really interesting one. So one of the things that I think is so mysterious for people who have been in high school, but for adults is not mysterious at all because of just the nature of being out in the world. You all as high school students have really been kind of on a timeline conveyor belt together for most of your lives. And everything has been really structured in that way. And while the reality is, if you did go through college in 4 years and all your friends did too, which is, again, relatively unlikely that everyone would be on the same timeline, the moment college stops, all of that also stops. The adult world is really about being on your own timeline and taking things when you're ready for them and when you're ready for them to come. And so one of the things we encourage students to do is to start really practicing that for themselves right after they've graduated high school, really thinking about what they need and what they ultimately want out of their lives, because the timeline is going to be great. I can tell you that lots of our gap year students have this worry that Drew has shared, but the reality is they tend to come home after their fall experience, right? It's right around the winter holidays. Their friends who have gone off to college have come home, or if they've gone elsewhere, they've come home too. And while they're all getting together, stories get swapped, as you can imagine they do. And sometimes the friend stories are like, oh, I'm taking these 4 classes, or oh, I went to this great party, or oh, I joined this really cool club. And that's really neat. And college is really neat because it has all those opportunities. But you as a gap year student might be like, wow, that's so great, buddy. And I was just spent the entire semester in South America. I had a chance to go to the Galapagos Islands and study conservation and wildlife biology. Did you know how unique the biology is on the Galapagos Islands? And I trekked the Inca Trail and went to Machu Picchu. And also, I'm going to get a chance to do all of those amazing things in college as well. You're not going to miss anything, right? The reality is you are augmenting all of that incredible academic study with real world experiences. Think about the perspectives you're going to be able to bring back to the college classroom that you're going to be able to offer not only to your classmates, but all your friends as well. So I know that this is something that people think about a lot, which is this idea of, will I be misaligned? But the truth is, gap year students tend to find themselves within the gap year community at the college, which there tends to be hundreds of gappers who are at many different colleges around the US. And that's really fun to be able to connect with that community. But you're also likely going to be involved with upperclassmen a lot earlier. You're probably going to get more connected with some of your professors because, again, you're probably going to be very engaged in school. And ultimately, you're probably going to get involved and more closely aligned with the people that you want to spend time with faster because you've already figured out what's important to you. You're not going to be experimenting in this club or that club because you probably already have a great idea of what you want. So I can tell you that when I talk to adults who never had a chance to take gap time, lots of them say, wow, I really wish I'd had that opportunity. Like if I'd known then, I would have taken the time. And when I talk to gappers who have returned and they go off to college, you don't hear people talking about being regretful of that or that they feel mismatched and not in line with their friends. They actually get to make great friends at school and are likely going to make friends with a much more diverse group at school than if you had just gone straight on into kind of the freshman dorms. I hope that's an okay answer for you, Drew.
Thanks so much, Jason. I'm seeing another question here from Sarah about the timing of a gap year. When do people make this decision, and how long does it typically take to plan the process?
Such a good question. I was just talking with a family who has two college or about to graduate age students as well, who are in the same predicament. So many students are finding out what colleges they have been accepted to if they've applied senior year, and that's fantastic. My general rule of thumb is when an individual knows for sure that they want to take gap time, that's the right time to begin planning. Because let's imagine what's left of senior year right now. We basically have March and April, which are 2 open months. And then May and June are full of all of these amazing senior activities, including graduation, right? It's a very distracting time, which is good. It's good distraction. But I can tell you, I hear from very few of my senior planning students during the months of May and June because everybody's so engaged and busy. So right now, if you're somebody who knows that they want to take gap time, is the right time to start planning because you have 2 months in front of you right now to begin researching organizations and experiences and really laying out at least your fall. Then you can take a break for those seniors activities that you want to do. And then in summer, get right back at it and start planning out your winter of your gap time. Now, if you're someone who has not found out about all of your colleges yet, and you're waiting until April on all those timelines, and then you're waiting to May to make that decision, again, the kind of ideology stands. The moment that you know you want to take gap time and that you're committed to it, that is the time to begin planning. There will still be spaces left for the fall in programs come May and come June. Starting in July, spaces will be quite sparse for the fall. And even in August, there might be a couple of them left, but it's unlikely you will get your first choice of fall experience. So again, if this is something you know you want to do, begin planning. And it doesn't take much. 15 minutes a day or a couple of hours during a week or weekend is all you really need to do right now to begin planning for the fall. It doesn't have to feel like an arduous project, particularly if you end up working with a gap year consultant or work with your high school guidance counselor to start looking at some potential options.
Great, Jason. Let's talk a little bit more about that relationship between the gap year and then transitioning into college. I'm seeing a couple of our attendees ask about students heading to a gap year and then realizing they may not want to do college afterwards. Is that a critique, or is that something common you see, that stepping off the conveyor belt may make you realize you don't want to go to college? Furthermore, another question in that same vein is gap year an okay time to be reapplying if you don't get into the colleges you want?
Great. Both really good questions. So when we look at the research about gap year students, and then I can just share from our own anecdotes, what we find is that gap year actually pushes students back towards their education after they have completed their gap time. And so the most comprehensive study that was done of this was done of several hundred college-bound students in the United States. And what the researchers found was after their gap year, 90% of them returned to college that fall. 90% is great, but that's an A minus, right? That's not like, we should be waving a banner and posting it, right? That's an A minus. And the researchers thought it was an A minus too. So they went back to all of the individuals who had said that they didn't go right on to school and asked them, hey, what happened to you? Like, did you run off and become a surf instructor in Costa Rica? Do you live on a yoga ashram now somewhere? Like what happened to you? Like, was it your parents' worst nightmare? And ultimately, what they found to a person within the study, which is, I think, quite remarkable, and I've seen the same, each one of those individuals who did not go right back onto school had an extenuating circumstance that either involved family finances that had occurred during that gap time, which means they just didn't have enough money for the student to go on to school right away, or there was a family health emergency. So when they look an additional 6 months out, every single one of those people had actually returned and gone on to school. So just from the study, from that kind of data, there is no evidence that would suggest that gap time is going to push a student away from the college path. And I think anecdotally, we have seen exactly the same thing. But not everybody knows going into a gap year that they want to go to college. Actually, some people are utilizing this time to determine if they want to go or not. And this is where I do think gap year can be really helpful for that particular archetype of student, right? For that particular individual, because the reality is gap time is going to let you explore in a hands-on way some of the things that ultimately you would be going back to a classroom to study. You might find that you are interested in medicine, but that you might not need to actually go pre-med to be able to satisfy that. Maybe going right on to nursing school would be a better choice for you. And some students really figure those kinds of things out. Going on to what is a trade-based school, right? That's what we could consider that, might be actually a faster avenue to get into the career that you want. And again, what parent isn't going to be happy if their child is content, happy, and knows where they want to go? So we're finding that this is not an issue. The place where gap time isn't actually gap time, and this is important, is when students, again, approach this without any level of intention. Choosing to just not go on to college and sit in the basement and play video games all year is not gap time, right? That's just not going on to college. Gap time is actually choosing to do something intentional. It's making a choice. Again, even if that is work, that is a productive way to spend time. We're looking for productive and intentional. And Drew, your second question was about students who haven't applied in senior year. Is that right?
The question was about not getting into a school initially, taking gap time, and then reapplying. Is that something you see?
Oh, sure. Yeah, great question. So there are some students who unfortunately will not get into the college of their dreams during the senior year application cycle, or students who have changed their minds about which schools they want to go to between the beginning of senior year when you had to decide and the end of senior year when you actually have to make a choice of which school you go to. There are many students who will reapply to colleges during their gap time. And there are also many students who will apply to college for the first time. So this advice or this kind of pattern can go to both of those. And so what would happen is optimally in the spring of senior year, you would visit or revisit the schools that you think you might want to go to. You get to understand their application process and their cycle. In the summer, you would do as much of the applications for those schools as you possibly can without submitting. Go on your fall gap experience, which is likely to end around Thanksgiving or right before the middle of December. Come home, write an incredible essay about what you just did during your gap time, and submit those applications in the fall of your gap time, the late fall, between essentially November and December. And that's the way that students are able to reapply or apply for the first time while they're in their gap year. We've seen lots of students do this. It's becoming much more common for students to do this. And we're seeing it as being very successful. It's successful for a couple of reasons. One, your senior year transcript, your academic vitae, is now complete, right? Both fall and spring semester are going to be represented on there. So your GPA, particularly if you've shown positive academic trajectory, could actually be more robust than it was going into senior year when you were just starting to make those applications. So that's one positive thing. Whatever you chose to do in the summer will be reflected on your college application, right? If it was a job, if it was an internship, if it was volunteering, if it was coaching, all of those things can be utilized. And then finally, of course, there's this idea that, wow, look how mature this individual is. They took time to pursue their interests, no matter what it was, and they actually have gone out into the world. I imagine this person is going to be more mature and excited to come to the campus once they're actually there. And so colleges look at all of those things, and that's a real feather in your cap. The one last thing that I do want to say about this idea of deferrals and deferment, and I'm going to drop a letter for you. The process of requesting a deferral within your gap year basically means writing a letter to your college. And so you'd want to investigate your college's deferment policy for a gap year. And most colleges have that posted online. If not, you can always call the Office of Admissions. It is not going to jeopardize your candidacy. And you're essentially going to write a letter. And I'm going to post a sample one here, which you could modify, to your own uniqueness. But the idea is essentially, hello, my name is Jason Sarouhan. I'm so excited to attend College X. I'm requesting a deferral so that I can take a gap year because I want to pursue my interests in A, B, and C. I feel like this is going to make me a more productive and contributing member of the community at College X once I'm able to return. I hope you'll grant my request for deferment. most colleges in the country do not need to know what you're going to do specifically. They want to have a sense that you're going to make this time, again, productive and that it's intentionally taken. So if you apply for a deferral or deferment, you should be able to hear about that in the late spring, and then that will allow you to continue moving forward with your plans for planning a gap year. The last piece to this is when you defer from a school, you can only really technically defer from one. You're depositing at that school. You might lose your deposit if you choose not to go there. It's usually a small amount. It's usually not the bulk of your actual tuition, but you are committing to that school. So if you commit to that school and then you choose to reapply somewhere else, there have been a few horror stories out there. None of my students, thankfully, have told me this has happened to them, but there have been a few horror stories where the school that offered the deferral and the school that the student applied to and got into, their people talked, and then all of the acceptances were rescinded, and that could leave you with nothing. And so you don't want that to happen. So if you're going to choose to defer from a school, be clear that you want to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to want to reapply or apply for the first time.
Thanks, Jason. I know we're running a little over on time. However, I did mark one final question in the Q&A to be answered, and I think this is a really important one. So I'm going to pass it over to you and we'll call it a night. And that is a question about low income and first gen students. Do you automatically recommend not going international, or is there any advice that you would give specifically to low income students as they plan a gap year?
Yeah. Gosh, I really appreciate the nature of the question because oftentimes, particularly with first generation students, there's a lot of family pressure, which is totally understandable, that you have a chance to go to college. I didn't have that chance. Go to college. And the reality is college is amazing. And if the right time for you to take gap time is after your first year of college, after you have to be in school for a certain period of time, certain number of semesters before each school will let you then take time off. But if the right time for you to take gap time to satisfy your family's desires and your interest is after that first year, then that's fantastic. And you should do that. And that might be the best compromise of all. But if you can help your parents or your guardians wrap their heads around the idea of you going in advance, of course, we've already stated what some of these amazing benefits are of taking gap time before school. For students who are not coming to the gap time with thousands and thousands of dollars that they can spend, I just want to keep coming back to this first point. A gap year doesn't need to be a big international experience, because going international tends to be quite expensive. If you do go international, how can you leverage the resources that you have? Do you have family that lives somewhere? Do your parents know somebody who lives somewhere else and you could crash on their couch or in a spare bedroom? Housing, of course, being one of the most expensive opportunities within that travel experience. But going international is wonderful. But again, there's so many amazing opportunities here. Let's just think about like a few of the national organizations that offer a stipended opportunity for you, including the AmeriCorps, right? At 18 years old, you could join AmeriCorps, which is a service-based organization, a national service-based organization, and spend between 3 and 9 months in service in the US. And you'd get paid for that. You get a stipend. You also get an educational grant for college. That could be an amazing way for you to stay here, have all of your expenses covered, and not incur any additional cost or debt on the way to college. So that might be an interesting option. Or choosing some of these more low-cost work exchange opportunities where you'd meet really interesting people, right? People who live on farms, people who live on ranches, people who need support, help with their kids, people who are looking to have someone, a native English speaker, come in and teach English. All of these are opportunities where you might be able to have a room and board, a true work exchange where you won't be spending money. And what a great opportunity to be involved in someone else's life in a really unique way. So there are lots of options out there. Additionally, I just want to mention, while there are not a tremendous number of grants out there or scholarships, although Go Overseas has one, and I hope we'll talk a little bit about it, for gap year students, there's not a ton of money out there for them. There is the opportunity, if families have been able to save in an investment plan called a 529 or a 529, to be able to use that money towards any program that offers college credit during the gap year. And many gap year programs do have that opportunity available now. So if you've invested money in that way, that might be a possibility. There's another organization called Verto, which is basically a first year of college, but it's international. And you can use 529 and FAFSA money for that and to pay for those experiences. So there's lots of creative ways that you might actually go about funding your gap time, or again, prioritizing maybe one experience that you spent money on and the rest of them being more working and work exchange. Again, there's no hierarchy of what is the best gap year experience. It's really just about finding what you can do, what you want to do, and ultimately how you want to go about doing it. And I just would never want to see a family look away from this idea because they don't think they can afford it. Because I can tell you, I've had families come to me with less money available for their child's gap year than it would cost to feed, house, and clothe them for the year. And those students have had really amazing and growth-filled time. So if you ever need advice about that, feel free to reach out to me. Be happy to help and just be able to point you in the right direction of some other resources.
Well, thanks so much, Jason. Unfortunately, this is where we have to cap tonight's program. A huge thank you to all of you who are still around, sticking with us for an extra 10 minutes after the end of our webinar. Obviously, Jason had a lot of things to say, and I certainly hope that all of these extra questions really helped you all out. Once again, I just dropped some more information in the chat, a little bit about how to get in touch with Jason, how to continue your gap year search on Go Overseas, as well as our gap year scholarship. As Jason mentioned, this is a fantastic opportunity to get involved, particularly secure your funding. If you are looking at taking gap time in the fall of 2023, I highly encourage you to head over to that link. With that being said, thank you all so much once again for spending your Monday nights with us. If you do have more questions, if you want to keep diving into it, learn more about programs, Jason and I will be here again, same time, same place tomorrow night with a couple of fantastic programs, getting more deep into the nitty-gritty of what some of the programs offered are. So I appreciate your time so much, and have a lovely evening.